Hi, I'm joined today by David Buckham, the CEO of Monocle Solutions, and we are in the heart of the wealthiest square mile in Africa, arguably, I suppose. And Dave is a best-selling author, multiple best-selling author. And his previous book, the one before the one we're talking about today, was longlisted for the Sunday Times Award or Sunday Times Literary List. And I believe this book, I've read all of them, he's done a bunch, is the best to date. And we're here to talk about that book today.
Thank you.
Welcome, David.
Thank you. I hope it is. I hope it is the best.
I certainly think it is. And I will definitely be recommending it as a December read. I think it'll be an amazing holiday and Christmas read for a lot of people. Narratives and even whole belief systems are often built off the backbone of the idea of a potential apocalypse. The impacts of this are deeply ingrained in human thought and the way that we go about our modes of being. It features in this book. What does it mean to you, and why does it feature in the book?
So, such an interesting starting question is, I see it everywhere. I call it apocalyptic thinking. It's got a term in Afrikaans as well as alles verloren. It's like throw out the baby with the bathwater thinking. And it emerges first from the early Christians during a period of time in the 1st century AD or BCE, which is during the time of persecution of Christians by the Romans and by Jews during the first 100 years, and specifically by the Romans when they destroyed the Second Temple. And there was a book that emerged out of that called the Book of Revelation, and in it were these apocalyptic dreams. And what I notice is that whenever you have a people or a group of people that feel trapped or feel it's often an abused concept, and you see it everywhere. So the world is going to end. The world is overpopulated. The population bomb. There's no water left. There'll be no water. There's a hole in the ozone layer. There's, a super intelligence. AI is going to destroy everyone. The climate is going to change. We're all going to burn up and die. There'll be, cities will be destroyed by sea. You see it throughout modern culture, and it's been throughout history. First, as I say, emerging in the Book of Revelation.
I was going to ask if it's a modern social media phenomenon, but I guess if it was born during the time of the Book of Revelation, I guess it's before social media.
Yes.
Richard Nixon, his geopolitical decisions and his own personal motives as well featured very heavily in the global order during his time as the leader of the so-called free world. And I think that his story is very, very relevant right now in this moment in time. And I think in some ways that's also reflected in the book. Do you agree or disagree with this?
No, I 100% agree. So, we decided when we set out to write this book that we did not wish it to be a book of like current affairs. And the reason is because it's very important to us that this book survives for 10 to 15 to 20 years. Ideally, the book would survive for 100 years. And if you focus in your writing too much on the immediate present, which would be, let's say, Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump, in South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, you're focusing on it's going to be a current affairs book, and we have written those books before.
Yes,
we've written The Age of Menace. We wrote The End of Money, Unequal, Why Banks Fail. So, in order to make the book timeless, so to speak, we needed to find a period in time which would reflect and refract upon this period of time without explicitly referencing this period of time.
Yes.
And I believe that the 1968 election of Richard Nixon was probably one of the most significant moments in modern history, as was Henry VIII's decision to leave the Catholic Church.
Yes.
And so we focus very strongly on Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger and on the Vietnam War, because I do believe that's when the American soldier who was doing good in the world, that narrative of America saving the world from the Nazis, transformed into an ugly America, an America that destroyed lives, an America, a Richard Nixon America, as opposed to an America that ended World War II.
Well, that's a very illuminating thought, that in basically 2 decades, there was such a moral and ethical shift in America's soul, I guess, if you want to call it like that.
Yeah, I think in totality, in the Western soul, if you think about it, Aidan, you have the League of Nations, then you have the United Nations, which is going to rebuild Europe. You've got the Marshall Plan, the demilitarization of Japan and of Germany, and you have John Maynard Keynes designing a future world which is based on the dollar, which is based on the gold standard. And you have, relatively speaking, a stable world order in which liberal democracy will inevitably beat communism in the Cold War. Then you fast forward to 1990 and liberal democracy does beat communism and the Cold War ends. But before that, you have the blood stains of American brutality in Vietnam and Cambodia and Laos and Korea and a different kind of America, a very violent America. And when I say America, I don't only mean America. I mean the World Bank, the IMF, I mean Europe, a kind of post-colonial pillaging of Africa and Southeast Asia. And that moment in time, in history, is best exemplified by Richard Nixon exiting the gold standard, the Watergate affair, his lies to the American people about wanting to exit the Vietnam War, whilst actually continuing it. And for me, that reflects, without being very explicit, very well upon the times that we live in now, which is...
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
I think you did amazingly well, you and Robin, your co-author, to draw that golden thread from these historical narratives through to the contemporary moment. You did just so well with that. You guys created an iconic hit list of films and plays that you went through in the book. It was quite spectacular. It was like the literary version of Forrest Gump's soundtrack list.
I love that comparison.
And it makes for a thrilling read. But from your perspective, what richness does it add to the read? I feel it, but can you maybe explain it?
So, what I love about film, particularly, and I love film, is that the storytelling is so well done in a good film. So you've got to zoom in normally, and then you're not quite sure where you are as a viewer. And then you've got the zoom out and you start to gather the historical facts and the context, etc. And when you're writing a book called The Spell, the story of human progress and how the West lost its soul, the reader is either going to start the book and go, oh my gosh, I really don't feel like reading 110,000 words of history, or they're going to go and get drawn in and pulled in immediately. Yes. So we used film explicitly because we're contemporizing, for lack of a better term.
Yes.
We're making contemporary historical facts, such as the use of the play and movie A Man for All Seasons by Robert Bolt to explain Henry VIII. Rather than tell the story historically, we used a play to do so. And I enjoy, and Robin, we enjoy writing like that in this kind of contemporaneous fashion. And if you think about it, that's how people get their information from, little documentaries, or the world is now very visual.
Yes, it certainly worked with me. It immediately drew me in, and it also brought a great structure to the book, a nice flowing read. So congratulations with that. That's fantastic. You're speaking about apocalyptic narratives, and the science of climate change comes up. And for me, it's difficult to debate that. I'm obviously not a climate scientist, so I go with a scientific consensus. Having said that, it appears that there's been a departure from climate science into a whole other thing, which is climate narrative. And they seem to be misaligned at certain points. Can you maybe, through the book, illuminate that a little bit?
Yes, yeah. So we spend the latter part of the book on the topic of science in general. And we give several examples of where we move away from science to the scientific narrative. So one of the examples is COVID, which is we don't know to this day where COVID came from. And another is climate change. So we trace the origins of environmentalism and environmentalist thinking, which tended towards and has tended towards and continues to tend towards apocalyptic thinking. So people tend to say things like, if we don't do this and this by such and such a date, which is like very near term future, then the world's going to end. We're all going to die, And so you get some kind of very obvious errors that are made by scientists or scientific writers or by media people. I mean, the population bomb predicted, that we would all starve to death quite a long time ago in the 1980s, by the year 2000. Now we're in, 2025, and now we're worried actually about the opposite, which is that the population will decline. And
that's flying around very quickly.
Aging population. So what we think about the climate change narrative is that climate change, which is the idea that the climate is changing in a way that is caused by human activity, as opposed to the climate is changing, which is always changing. There was a little ice age in the early 20th century. What people are buying into is a very extreme form of a post-environmentalist narrative, and it's a pre-apocalyptic narrative, and it creates tremendous mass consent with ideas such as we need to build electric cars that suit certain individuals and suit certain countries that are building electric cars, in spite of the fact that the actual construction of the electric car involves digging up materials, rare earth materials, that are actually more destructive than other outcomes would have been, such as making petrol cars more efficient. So the climate change narrative is one that's very harassing, disruptive, and intolerant, and that's dangerous. One of my esteemed colleagues said to me, David, could you please not write about climate change? Everyone agrees on it. And I said, Exactly. That should worry us, that everyone agrees on it.
Do you think apocalyptic narratives like the one associated with climate change now are more profitable than they've ever been, like the spin-off of greenwashing around the climate change narrative?
100%. I mean, I'll give you one example. Is I'm forced by virtue of the fact that free press in general in the Western world has almost died because its business model has been destroyed by big tech, right? I mean, it's virtually impossible to watch a news channel without it being interrupted by endless adverts. The worst by far being CNN. Not nearly as bad as BBC, but CNN has got one advert after the next about either one of their own journalists or Qatar Airways or Emirates Airways or Visit Doha. And, you know, one of the new narratives that I've seen emerging is that Saudi Arabia is going to go to 2030 and they're going to be not net zero, which means that net zero means that the outcome of carbon emissions will be net zero, which means there's, you know, we'll capture carbon emissions. And this is deeply ironic from a country that, you know, its entire economy is based on fossil fuel.
Yeah.
But by a strange definition in the United Nations, the IPCC, it's not about the people producing the fossil fuel that's then consumed, it's about the consumption of it.
Yes.
So thereby allowing Saudi Arabia and China, for example, to evade their own coming to terms with their economy being based on fossil fuel. But what I find really kind of amusing is instead of it being net zero, there's now this narrative of net negative. So you can't quite believe it. Is net zero is not good enough for Saudi Arabia. They want to be net negative. In other words, they're going to be the country in the world that is not adding to the carbon emissions.
Yes.
They're taking away from the carbon emissions. And you know,
Yeah.
Project NEOM is a great example of this kind of mass cognitive dissonance. Now it's 2025 now. The Project NEOM is supposed to be, it's a city in northwestern Saudi Arabia that's supposed to be completed by 2030. I predict that it will never be built. I'm fairly certain I'm right. We can test this in the future. But this kind of narrative which has been espoused by a totalitarian regime which you know, incarcerates and you know, murders journalists is just sort of greenwashed or sportswashed. Or, you know, if you take the F1 races, how many of them are taking place in totalitarian petrostates? So I'm fairly sure that people don't like to hear this, but if you then apply that same kind of logic to the climate change narrative, sorry, I mean, this is a bit of a monologue, but if you take the upcoming Conference of Parties, which is part of the IPCC, which is the idea of multilateral effort to stop the Earth heating up, you know, past a certain point of no return when we're all going to die in this apocalypse. It's taking place in the Brazilian rainforest in a place called Buckham. And they're busy scarring the planet by building a freeway to Buckham to facilitate and host the Conference of Parties.
Yes.
Which is supposed to save the world, including the rainforest. So there could be no clearer indication to me than photographs I've seen of this big scar tissue through the rainforest. It's unbelievable. We should actually get an image of it and
Yeah, I guess consumers of modern politics don't want to wake up to the nasty pollution that the consumption of their politics, their choice of politics has. Is mankind as a whole under an illusion that's born of ignorance and cognitive dissonance that brings about a spell, one that maybe is pathologically entrenched as a human coping mechanism?
Yes and no. I think it's my belief that so if we go a step back, Yuval Harari, who wrote *Sapiens* and 21 Lessons, great writer, says that human language emerged from chatting in the caves, like chatter, talking behind people's backs. That's where human language emerged. There are many theories about how human language emerged, but for me, there's some kind of moment of self-consciousness where human beings looked upwards at the sky and thought, why are those objects travelers, those were the planets, and why are those objects fixed, those were the stars? I'm not sure that any other animal has thought about that. So that's my definition of self-consciousness, of consciousness. From that moment on, that animal, that human animal, then asks the question, what am I doing here? Why do I have feelings? Or do I have feelings? Why do I want to be good? And then we start to create, in my view, stories. This is the point of *Sapiens*. The point of the spell is that those stories never ended. In other words, those stories occupy us from the minute we're born, possibly before we're even born, if you believe in Carl Jung, and we are driven by them. So one of those narratives is science, that we understand how the world works. This is not true. We don't understand how the world works. We give many examples in the spell. So the spell is the idea that we know far less, and I know I'm not doing a very good sales job on the book, we know far less. The reader is supposed to get to the end of the book and go, oh my gosh, that is very worrying.
Yes.
We know far less than we thought we did. That's the point.
Yes. And not only that, but I mean, I read very broadly and consume a lot of information, and not only did I arrive at that point towards the end of the book, but I had a roller coaster of those moments through the book, where I got to end of just chapters randomly throughout the book, and went, oh man, that was a little bit of an information highway that I've just driven. Let's talk about AI and superintelligence. We are on the verge. AI is obviously one of the hottest topics in the world at the moment. Again, apocalyptic narratives attached to it. I don't believe in the apocalypse of AI. I simply don't buy into it. I know that it's a polarizing topic. But not only is AI emerging at the same time that human beings are getting their heads around quantum computing. And I would like to ask your opinion on AI itself, and maybe if you can give some kind of prediction on AI once and if it does get married with quantum computing in the future. I mean, they're even saying things like quantum computing with AI can solve communism, which for me is a crazy thought. But
so we need to be. So I'm going to sort of be very careful to unravel the different narratives, because they often get intertwined in ways that are disingenuous and become misinformation. So, first of all, the AI narrative is the idea that there will be a kind of horizon moment in which suddenly there will be superintelligence or general intelligence, artificial general intelligence. And I think it depends what your definition of intelligence is. Certainly, AI has already reached that point. I mean, AI can destroy any chess player. So if your definition of intelligence is to play chess, AI has already got there. So it's very much dependent on what your definition is.
Yes.
During the various revolutions, the Industrial Revolution, the .com, the internet, there have been significant changes to society, to productivity, owing to technological advantages. So I do believe that AI is a very important feature of our future, and it will change the way that we work. Not that there will be fewer jobs, but we will work differently. Just like when we got the internet, we have made incredible use of it, and telecommunications, the telephone, etc., etc. The idea of super intelligence, I go back to the Turing test. So Alan Turing, famous mathematician, said, at what point is artificial intelligence indistinguishable from human intelligence? Well, the way to do it would be to have a computer answer the questions and to ask the person asking the questions whether it was a computer or not. Now, it's my view that at present, intelligent people, and by intelligent people, I mean well-read people who communicate in a sophisticated manner, would spot AI pretty easy most of the time. So artificial general intelligence, I would define as when sophisticated people, most of the time, like 99.99% of the time, will not be able to spot artificial intelligence. It will almost be like human. And I think that's further away than people think. That's my first prediction. My second is that I too don't believe it's apocalyptic.
No.
I think it's a good technology. It has some bad uses. So did the internet, as we saw with Silk Road. And I think we're still learning. What I noticed, though, is that either people, and this is apocalyptic thinking, either people believe that we live at this incredible apex of human history, or they believe that the apocalypse is nigh. And that's the type of thinking that I would like people to change, is the apocalypse is not nigh, and we don't live at the apex of human history. If you think about it, 50 years ago, we had the Concorde and we had the space shuttle. We had people landing on the moon.
Yes.
We don't have any of those things anymore. We have Elon Musk has regular, rockets blow up.
Yeah,
like every other week it feels like. Shame, probably not every other week, but pretty often. So I think we live more dangerously in polarized times, and more so than ever, people should avoid apocalyptic thinking. That's kind of the point of this book.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with you. It causes a whole lot of unnecessary social anxiety. It causes disharmony. It really isn't productive. And on the last note, I'll also just say that the only innovation Musk's ever done with regards to rocket science is a single reusable rocket. Everything else NASA did before him. But we have come down to the end of our interview. We are unfortunately limited for time. But just an enormous congratulations to you and Robin Wilkinson. I will be buying copies of this book for friends and family over the holiday season. It's a magnificent read, and if you're into things like banking and finance, I would highly recommend some of his other books. Or truly great reads. Thank you for joining us, or thanks for having me, I should rather say, and we'll see you in the future.
Thank you, Aidan. I hope everyone reads the book, The Spell, the story of human progress and how the West lost its soul. It's not nearly as serious as it sounds.
No, it really isn't. It is, but it isn't. It's a great read.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us. Bye for now.